My name is Dave Howden, and I'm Technical Services Manager for Biamp's Loudspeaker Solutions Group based in Chester, Pennsylvania. I want to thank you for joining me today to go through some of the updates to VenueTune, Voltera D and DM models. I've been part of the Biamp family for 6 years, but previously was with Community Loudspeakers for 21 years. One big happy family now. All right, so VenueTune, new features, overview here. We've added a wide range. It's an evolving piece of software. One of the most requested features has been added. That is the ability to recall a profile or a program from a device using VenueTune, and as long as you're on firmware 5.1 or newer, you now have that ability. We also added the ability to update the firmware from within VenueTune also. We'll take a look at that in more detail. And network port mode selection. Previously, this wasn't something selectable, but now it is. We will look at that in detail. We also added the ability to create a loudspeaker profile, within VenueTune also. Additions to the latest ALAMOS library. We've done major updates to the V2 series of loudspeakers and E series from our DeSono line. Updated voicings, for those, and sure you'll agree they definitely, definitely work better, a bit more optimized. We added lockable groups within the design phase. We have ways now to, when we are doing monitoring, either locally or remotely, we can filter faults and warnings for easier diagnosis of system state. Additionally, we added a health list to the speaker configuration panel. For some of the viewing, when you have a project designed, which we're not going to get so much into today, please see my previous webinar, the link on the handout, to get into more of the actual project design. So we have new ways to view that with the panning, auto zoom, and the show all objects view for larger projects. Voltera D and DM are, definitely growing in popularity, and we've needed to increase the number of amplifiers addressable in VenueTune to 32 for those larger projects. We also have power and headroom displayed when matching speakers. We'll touch on that a little bit later also. And the loudspeaker version, just in case you're wondering, because there have been various iterations of speakers, but keep the ALAMOS library always with latest, greatest, most up to date, with firmware releases. But those are viewable on the add loudspeaker window also. So let's do a quick overview of our Voltera D models. Voltera D is a simple and efficient, effective way to drive any Biamp loudspeaker. In part, this is due to our new and regularly updated ALAMOS library of loudspeaker presets. All loudspeaker mode supports, our largest ever loudspeaker profile library. Includes options for multiple crossover applications. We can choose different high passes, different low passes for full range and subwoofers when they're integrated together in the same project to perhaps save you some time commissioning. And we of course provide all the tap options for loudspeakers, which are transformer based. So this allows you to easily recall optimized presets with protection, limiting, equalization to ensure your deployed systems are operating in the optimal manner. Voltera D amplifiers are completely configured from software. There's no switches, no knobs for anybody to mess with out in the field. No external gain or level controls. Again, everything is handled inside of VenueTune. We have five models in the Voltera D series. We have our 2404, our 1204, 2408, 1208, and our newly this year released 4804, which provides 4800 watt power supply and up to four channels of 1200 watt symmetrical power. As a reminder, any combination of drive can be facilitated. You can have mixed, low impedance, 70 volt, 100 volt, anything you want on any output channel. No limitations there. Now shipping is our Voltera D and DM 4800 series. So 4800 watts of chassis power. There's three different SKUs, two of them in the M family and one of them in the D family. And if you're a fan of Community's ALC 1604D for your higher power needs, this is the model to look at now and going forward for these applications. Whether you're driving, R2s, on football fields, or IV6 arrays in auditoriums, or you name the application, R2 Maxes, biamplified speakers, or our larger I series, dual subwoofers, the 600 or 800 series. The Voltera D, 4800 has the power, to achieve the high outputs required with those sorts of products, and no bridging is needed. Within these systems, through power sharing or amplifier configuration, we've eliminated the need to bridge on site, and also potentially reduce the wiring confusion for the installers on site. Figuring out plus and minus to which channel, to achieve bridged operation. Voltera D, just all around, all models are much easier to implement in this way. And oh, by the way, all Voltera Ds are made here in the USA at our Oregon factory. Looking at the DM models, which we're not so much concentrating on today, but the DM models, M for more, more, that more is more DSP. Voltera D and DM are functionally the same when considering the amplified loudspeaker controlling portion of it, but Voltera DM includes full performance of basically a standalone, Forte X, DSP inside of it for all your programming needs for you folks that are programming with Tessera. But we're not concentrating on the Tessera side here. We're concentrating on the VenueTune side. The Voltera M models of the 4800, we have a 4-channel, or we have a 2-channel version of these systems. So whether you need, in the case of the 2-channel, if you need two 2400 watt channels or one 4800 watt channel into your forum load, it's worth noting that the 48 2M, even if you don't need the M part, is 10% less cost than a 4804. And if you do need all the output out of one channel, the 4802 M is the one that will give that to you. Whereas the 4-channel versions, you can get up to 3.6 kilowatts out of each channel through power sharing, but the 4-channel units don't allow you to get that full output that you can with the .2 M, which might be required for your larger subwoofer systems. put the slide in here, just, kind of, a little bit easier to read, models and specs from smallest to largest, going from bottom to top. We're noting the D models, which is what we're controlling with the VenueTune software, showing the out of the box symmetrical power of these systems. So for an 8-channel 1200 watt, well, get 150 watts. But we can, through power sharing, assign power or reserve power to any single channel of up to 600 watts on the 1200.8. Again, looking at the 4800, jumping back up to the top here, the 4800 2M. Yes, we can, for a 4-ohm load, we could get all 4800 watts out of one wire pair with very high, peak voltage outputs and very high current to drive these systems also. So the 70 volt, 100 volt output capabilities are listed here. Most times they're in line with the low impedance capabilities, but there's some slight aberrations here and there. So easy to reference in the future chart for your, for your loudspeaker powering needs. Another way to look at this is, the gray bar within this graph is showing, our out of the box symmetrical, power per channel for the various models. Looking at, from the left-hand side, the 2-channel models, the 3 of those. The middle, we've got the 4-channel models, and to the right, we've got to have our 2 8-channel models. So the blue line up top shows, how much power increase we can get from power sharing. What's the maximum achievable output? Again, this relates directly to the graph that I just showed. It's just another way of, seeing the information. So Voltera D and DM, power sharing. We came up with this ability through a number of design choices. But first of all, amplifiers, they're all about the power supply these days. Power supply design is paramount to make these work. And our power supply, one of the newest, most advanced power supplies on the market in the Voltera family. Most other amplifiers, have rails that drop when they deliver higher power. They're sagging significantly, and this leads to reduced power as well as unwanted transient clipping. The Voltera D uses a design that maintains the rail even at the highest output levels, lowest impedances, to avoid this. That is on a per channel basis, so one channel will not affect another channel's operation. So high headroom in the output channels versus conventional size, and this is all true for both, for power, voltage, and current across the Voltera series. So symmetrical power. Often we have different power needs, across channels installations, but sometimes it's simple. Sometimes you just need 4 300 watt channels or 4 500 watt channels, and that's fine. Out of the box, we don't need to mess with power sharing. Voltera D, when it comes, when you load up ALAMOS settings, into it, it's set, set to, the amplifier is set to its symmetrical power until you start, working with the power shading. So symmetrical power, sometimes that works out just fine for us, and given all the different sizes of Volteras we have, you can usually find a controller that meets the needs of your installation. Asymmetrical power. So this is where we get into power sharing. And with power sharing, the focus is on the total power and total channel count. We can adjust, for a channel that maybe it only has a couple of 70-volt speakers on it, somewhere, or one low impedance speaker somewhere. But we have other speakers, on that amplifier chassis that that has different requirements. Perhaps we have a biamplified full range speaker where you want 600 watts, for the low frequency and 150 watts available to the high frequency. With Voltera D, rather than having to buy 2 or 4 channels of all 600 watts just when you only need that for maybe 1 or 2 channels, we can shade the power from the high, from the channel requiring lower voltage output or lower wattage, and that power can then become available to other channels. Why waste 400 watts of power when you're not going to need it? But just as an example, though. So this is one of the real advantages of being able to share power across different channels. But in the end, the sum of the power sharing cannot exceed the chassis power available out of that particular model amplifier. Another note here, hopefully you've heard of Biamp Workplace, which is our powerful cloud platform that allows you to do remote device management and monitoring. As long as you have a full-time internet connection, you could be monitoring these systems at your customer sites. Again, as long as you got an internet connection to it, could possibly be part of your service agreement, with that customer. Certainly, value added thing. There's a link to that in the handouts if you want more information on Biamp Workplace. One really neat thing that is part of our workplace toolkit is the Workplace Tools app. It's a very easy to use mobile app that is compatible, with our Voltera D and DM lines of amplifiers. It allows you to, with an app on your Android or Apple device to walk up to an amplifier, quickly scan it, and find out, a lot of information about it without cracking a computer open. So let's take a look. We've got our, NFC logo on the face of it. If you're an iPhone user, use the top of your phone. If you're an Android user, use the back of your phone, usually near the camera. To scan this, with the Workplace Tools app. Now, if you walk up to a Voltera and you scan it and you get an error such as this, well, that probably means, it most definitely means that the firmware is not version 5.1 or newer on it. So you do need to have up-to-date firmware for this NFC function to work with our Workplace Tools app. So assuming we do, we do have an amplifier that is at least on firmware version 5.1, which pretty much anything shipped in the last few months will be. Walk up to it, open the app, touch the scan button, go to the NFC logo closely, it'll beep back with you, and it's gonna pull all this information from the amplifier. You get useful things such as serial number, more digging around for that. Model, the firmware version clearly shown, and then device name, project name, when that project was created and then uploaded to the Voltera amp, what was its name. It also tells you about the port modes, what port mode is this set up to run in, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But it shows our ports, port 1 gives our IP and MAC address, port 2, IP and MAC address. Our Dante interface gives, it'll give you those addresses, give you an amplifier status, overall. More information on Dante interfaces, especially important if you're running in redundant mode. And it'll also give you a real-time channel status. Whether if a channel's faulted, and it happened to when I took this snapshot, I disconnected a couple speakers from the output, so it just plainly says amp detected open circuit on channel. So useful information can be gleaned, very quickly just by walking up to an amp and having this app available to you. You can find out a lot very quickly. Of course, we still have the front panel. If you don't have the app, there's still full monitoring with the status LEDs on the left-hand side. Generally, 4 different, up to 3 different states for each of those LEDs. Letting you what might be going on with the amplifier. What's the current state of that amplifier. We have the ability in multi-amplifier systems to locate which amp is which. We've racked up 4 or 6 of these, and just looking at the face of it. If we don't know the order that they were in, hit the locate button, and then that amplifier in VenueTune will show you which one you're physically touching there, just to make it easy to see what's online and what you're working on. Channel status indicators, they're still there. Again, if you don't have the app, tell you a whole lot of information about what's going on at the moment while the system is running. Won't spend a lot of time on this, but information at a glance. Signal, limit, temperature, mute. It's all there, and also indications for if there's a fault on a particular output of the amplifier. Many of you that that are transitioning from our legacy ALC 1604s that you really liked, you could just drive a simple analog inputs into the amplifiers. You could take a single input and assign it to all 4 outputs, or you could take 2 inputs and mix them to all 4 outputs, or any combination that you can dream up. The amplifier, defaults to the analog inputs when there's no Dante stream detected, which again, for a lot of 1 and 2 amp systems, you might not have networked media. So analog is just going to work when you pull the system out of the box. These are line level inputs, obviously one per output channel, and these also can support, perhaps Dante is your primary source. Well, they can revert to analog should you lose that networked audio. We also have ways of doing Dante redundancy. We'll get into that shortly also. The pinhole, if we get asked about this occasionally, the pinhole is basically used to reset to the default, VenueTune state, the amplifier. You hold it in for about 20 seconds, and it'll fully reset the amplifier to its nominal out-of-the-box state. This could also be needed if you or another technician, used Tessera software on the amp in the past in the shop. But do note that when you do a pinhole reset of an amp, it's going to clear out all the memory, but it will be back and ready to connect directly to VenueTune again. GPIO, I mentioned this just because there's so many functions that we hear about on a regular basis, and these are dedicated functionality. There's no programming of these pins. Input, we got a mute all. Maybe that could be useful in a fire alarm type system where you want to interrupt the audio within a system, due to some other condition of facility. So you can very easily, mute all by pulling these to ground. Health status, active fault flow on number 2. We can tell if a unit's, on or in standby from output 3. And we can put the amplifier into standby mode also using pin 4 on these systems. So there's a lot more details on these in the Voltera manual, but I just wanted to point these out, especially for my current ALC, 1604 or 404, 3202 users who are used to having these features. We've got you covered here also. All right, let's jump into networking. So Voltera Ds and Voltera DMs both have 2 gigabit NICs. They're labeled as P1 and P2. An interesting thing about port number 1 on all Voltera D and DM amps is that if you apply PoE plus on this port, and that switch that's providing that PoE, it's on a UPS or something of that sort, but mains power is lost on a site, the PO port will keep the DSP brains of the Voltera alive and communicating. And once mains power is restored, only the amplification portion of the loudspeaker controller needs to boot up, which takes about 10 seconds, as opposed to waiting a couple minutes, from a completely cold start for the entire chassis to power up. So pretty good case for backing up your network switch, which has PoE plus output capability. To keep the amp alive, or just have it wake up quickly depending on the use case for your system. Okay, IP addressing. We can access to adapter settings is from the network from the network settings menu. There's other ways to do this, but this is the most direct. The amplifiers, default to DHCP, so they'll probably, assuming, your laptop or whatever your programming is set up for DHCP. Might be fine for small installations. We don't have to do static IP addresses, but just depends on the policy of the network that you're working with. Perhaps you're an island and it doesn't matter, but the adapter settings and the adapter settings, we can select the NIC on the PC. I happen to just have this address set up here when I did it. But access the adapter settings, just the upper left-hand corner hamburger, or the menu bar, as I'm going to call it from here on out. And perhaps you do have Ethernet and Wi-Fi on there. Yeah, make sure you've got VenueTune talking on the proper one to the device that you're working on. If we do want to enter a static IP address, we can do that. We can do that in the device settings to meet the needs of your particular installation. So an IP address is always associated with each virtual amplifier during the design phase. Again, if you want to take a look at all these phases, check the link in the handout. My previous webinar went deep into the design of systems. But in the design phase and amplifiers action, we can manipulate the IP settings also, if that's how you prefer to do it. So out of the box, you might not need to even touch the network settings, but if you get into the menu and you want to look at your network settings and your device settings now. We're not on adapter settings anymore. We've gone to device settings. Our default port mode. Only port number 2 or P2 will support Dante. This makes it easy to get up and running. Generally for VenueTune, use P2, which is the main control interface for a single cable, converged control and media topologies. With VenueTune, we get Dante. We don't do AES67 or AVB configuration in VenueTune. That's over in the Tessera world. I also provided a link to the Tessera webinar in that handout that goes into more detail on this. But out of the box, your ALC is going to be defaulted to this. You could technically control whether you plug into port 1 or port 2. If you just need to program it, you've got an analog inputs, fine, you're good to go. In this default mode out of the box, if you want to do control in port 2 and pass Dante, you're ready to go. Life is good. Converged mode, which some of us call single wire. P1, port number 1 only for control and Dante. And maybe this is where you're putting your PoE plus to keep that DSP alive, should mains power be lost and your switches backed up. But in this mode, P2 does absolutely nothing if you plug into P1, but this is a setting you need to willfully change when you're configuring the network settings. We also have a new mode available in VenueTune, which is redundant. And redundant, this is for Dante. See here marked, our P1 is our primary Dante, port number 2 is our secondary, and control is only through P1. Again, that's fine. Primary and secondary Dante, of course, must be on separate subnets. Otherwise, it wouldn't make too much sense to be doing a redundant sort of scheme if everything's on one network. Won't let you configure it that way anyhow. All right, networking. One of the early requests we had was the ability to retrieve a configuration file from a device. So we go to our menu in the upper left and plug into the appropriate port, P1, P2, and click load from device. And then it's saying, well, which device? Well, the way I did it here, I only had one on the network. So then I can select the device, click open, and it will then pull the current programming and all the configuration information from that Voltera D amplifier and put it in your workspace so that you can further manipulate it. Again, this is a newer feature. As long as you have Tessera Firmware 5.2 or newer, which is latest, greatest, most current, what the hardware is shipping with these days, you have the ability to do this. And of course, you need to be on the most recent version of VenueTune also, which again, I have linked you to in that handout if you want to grab it. Firmware updates. Previously, we weren't able to do firmware updates with VenueTune, but now we can. Again, in that same menu, if we click on firmware update and we select which amplifier. Well, first we can observe the firmware within the ALCs. Then we can choose which one or ones that we want to update the firmware. Again, you'll need to have already downloaded the latest Tessera firmware, because Voltera Ds and DMs, they run on Tessera firmware. They don't have their own special thing. We try to keep it easy, with firmware on these systems. So this firmware, 5.2.0 is the latest, greatest one. If you have that down in your downloads folder at the site, connect to the amplifiers. select, you browsed for the firmware, you found that firmware, and now click the update button and update away. You probably want to have that firmware before you go out. Don't try, it might not be easy to get on a mobile hotspot because it's 600 megabytes, at the moment. And it takes about 5 minutes, to update. Status will be shown during the update process. So in progress, and then after about 5 minutes is what I timed it out as, completed, and it will then show you the current firmware residing on that loudspeaker controller. Power profiles. Couple of selections, within here. Again, this is in the deploy phase, and over power, we have live performance and live green. The simple explanation is when the amplifier is idle, you save about 30, you got about a 30% reduction in idle power draw when you have the live green mode selected. Those you want to go back and look at this in detail, what's really happening, what's happening, under the hood when we select these modes. Well, here the slide is for, for later reference, should you want the nitty-gritty details. Overbooking amplifier channels. So when we are in our design phase and match, and matching speakers, what we're looking at this percentage, the way that I have it shown here in the example, that is what percentage of the total chassis power is being used as you match your speakers. For greatest transient response, for those situations where the system is maybe actually doing live music with real instruments, real mics, and all that good stuff, and we want to, maintain that, full, dynamic range and transient capability across all channels. Keep this power level, close to 100%. We do have the ability to, book, up to 200% on an amplifier. I now have all 4 of these speakers, 12-inch two-way medium power I series, run full range, linked to this amplifier, and it's turned orange around it, telling me that I'm booked to 183%. Not the end of the world. Honestly, somewhere in so kind of the the short story is that when overbooking up to 200%, you're going to lose about 3 dB in transient output. And depending on what you're reproducing, especially if you're reproducing pre-recorded music, BGM music, streaming music, all the stuff that's normalized, -12, -14 LUFS by some streaming service, well, there's not a lot of dynamics there, probably. So overbooking an amplifier, when in my view, when you're doing a lot of pre-recorded or just or playback for your sports systems, your BGM systems, maybe your all hands spaces, such, not a big deal. Under 100% provides the greatest peak capability and the greatest dynamic reproduction. So for live music, it's okay, but it is okay, to book over 100% or even, up to 200%. If an installation needs to support a crest factor of 10, 12 dB from live music, and your simulations show that the loudspeaker, can deliver 3 dB more output than it needs for the target SPL, well then, feel free to book up and, to 100+%. There's not really any drawbacks. We'll still have, the necessary, headroom, for those high energy peaks, and we'll still be able to, produce the continuous SPL, from Voltera. It's just those high peaks that, that may be limited if all the channels are doing the same thing within an amplifier chassis. Our ALAMOS library. This is something that I didn't really delve too deep into in my last webinar. But when you're adding a speaker, we have the ALAMOS library, and we have our user-defined library. There are different, under the application. So we have brand, family, line, model. And in the application, we have different crossover frequencies, which we've provided for you, high pass and low pass, if we were to look at the subwoofers also. Whereas, in a system with just a bunch of, distributed, this is an 8-inch two-way system, and there's no subwoofer support, you're probably going to just run those in full range mode. But if we got into a situation where we were perhaps integrating a subwoofer system with smaller speakers, we've given you presets, since you cannot modify the factory presets. We've given you presets with different high pass frequencies, 100, 125, 160, and 200 are very common as you scroll through the list. This can help you, mate up low frequency systems with full range systems, though, by providing a better transition, between loudspeakers and better, just better functionality. If I had a subwoofer with this 8-inch two-way system, perhaps I'd use the 100 hertz or 125 hertz high pass, and my subwoofer, perhaps I'd select, an 80 hertz low pass, something, and maybe intentionally leaving a gap in between them. If the subwoofer's in close proximity to the full range, this could help us later on in the commissioning phase. We might not have to EQ out if you just, equalize out a big low frequency bump. If we selected 100 hertz high pass, 100 hertz low pass, and you do the typical thing where subwoofers may be gained up 4 to 6 dB higher than the full ranges, well, you're gonna have a buildup. If we, oftentimes if we leave a little bit of a gap, 20 hertz, 40 hertz gap, in between the full ranges and low frequencies, we can avoid that buildup at the crossover, at crossover frequency. Again, there's a lot of it depends here, but here's why we have these. We're trying to make life easier for you folks, especially for those systems that maybe somebody isn't going to come in with a full-blown, smart rig and commission in that way. So we're trying to help things, sound better through our ALAMOS library and giving you options when integrating, subwoofers and full ranges together. And there may be other reasons to use, a high pass, than full range, for some systems. But I'm not going to get too far off the rails with this. We also now have the ability, to define our own loudspeakers, within VenueTune. We weren't able to do this, previously, but we have added a wide range of, just starter presets, if you will, here, depending on, what the needs of brand XYZ speaker that may already be in an installation you got there. If you integrated your other Biamp loudspeakers, okay, here's these legacy speakers that are mounted up in a glass ceiling and you're not touching them and they're staying there. And all right, let's, we can select one of the predefined loudspeaker settings. Maybe it's a high Z, maybe it's something that's high Z, low Z. Maybe it's a more complicated system, 2, 3, 4 channels. We've even got subwoofer settings, if you've run into brand XYZ's subwoofer and you're going to get the, ideally you're going to get the settings, from, for that speaker, and then enter them by hand by modifying these settings. But this gives you a very good basis to start creating a loudspeaker setting. Start creating a loudspeaker setting with. We'll get into that a little bit in a moment here. Something I was asked to include again is basic signal flow inside Voltera D. Signal flow, we have our inputs as it relates to VenueTune. We've got Dante and analog inputs. We have user adjustable EQ on the front end here. So the yellow EQ, we've got 16 raised cosine EQs. We have all these other options that we're working in here. When we create a loudspeaker group in a in a design, this is the equalizer that is affecting the group. So it's prior to the loudspeaker input, but this is what we call in the user section. Then within the loudspeaker input, we have available to us on the 8 filters. We can even add our own FIR. The output section. Loudspeaker EQ, this is for any factory setting from the ALAMOS library that you use. This is all locked up, but if you create your own, all this is available to you. But these settings are locked up from the factory, including our limiter, protection, high pass, etc., etc. We also have a full range, as mentioned previously, and more in my previous webinar, logging of temperature, mains voltage, current. Headroom monitoring of each amplifier output also. So what we're going to do is quickly look at creating our own loudspeaker. So I'm in the design phase right now, and I want to add a speaker. Now I could go through the ALAMOS library and search for a standard speaker. They're all in here, or I can go to user defined and I can click new. Now here's the screen we're looking at, and this gives us a good starting point. For my example, I'm going to select this custom. It's preset to 100 watts, it's full range, it's low Z and it's high Z, and it's a single channel speaker. I'm going to do that. I'm going to click on create, and I'm going to close it. Now I have my loudspeaker on the screen. And if I go to edit and edit profile, again, we're in the design phase, speaker action, and now I'm in edit, and I selected the speaker for the profile. I can take a look at what's pre-programmed in here, because this is not your speaker yet. Now this is somebody else's speaker. If it's a constant voltage system, we support up to 5 different taps for your various outputs here, and you can select whether you want to deal with the 100 volt side, 100 volt world or not. Say our speakers, they have a maximum 50 watt tap. Well, if I type in 50 in the first line, it propagates out the most common 3 dB steps. Between taps, or 5 steps if you select the last one. So very easy to let's say set up what taps the speaker is capable of supporting. Limiters. Well, if we're working in constant voltage world, Voltera D is smart, and it knows whether you're using 100 volt or 70 volt configured loudspeakers. It knows how to set those itself. Very standard. But on the low impedance side, since when I did select my speaker, I told it that it was capable of both low impedance and high impedance. So not going to get too far into this. Go through the basics here. Again, you want to get this information for that speaker from the manufacturer, or however you can dig it up. Nominal impedance 8 ohms. Well, or perhaps it's a 4 ohm system and it has a minimum impedance of we'll say 3 ohms. Recommended amplifier power, well, maybe it's a 400 watt speaker. We would want to enter that there. And then we need our voltage capabilities for this speaker. I'm just going to generically speak of this right now. Again, it's something you're going to have to hunt for or set up yourself. Simple way to do it, based on, AES 1984, noise form is okay. 400 watts into 4 ohms. Okay, perhaps that speaker has an RMS rating or a thermal rating of 40 volts. This is volts we're working with. And for my peak, my peak limiter here, again, refer to the information on that speaker. Maybe it's twice, maybe it's twice that number. So for does 40 volts RMS, do 80 volts peak. Attack and release times, I would say a 1 second attack and 1 second release for a cone-based loudspeaker system that's say 8 inches or larger is probably in the ballpark. Your peak limiter, you may choose to go with the 100 millisecond release. You may decide you want a shorter release for the peak limiter. You can set that in. If you want a soft knee threshold, if you want it to start getting a bit quieter rather than just running right into the limiter, you can define that it starts 3 dB below each of these thresholds. We start softly getting you into limiting. Shaping is more of a advanced, an advanced function, but we can insert filters to affect it. Perhaps we have a full range speaker that's okay. Yeah, it was 400 watts, and if we wanted the limiter to start, it's a 2-way, and maybe we want the limiter to kick in sooner at starting at about crossover frequency. Again, these are advanced topics. Please research them a little bit more on your own, but we do have the ability to put filters in. We could put filters in at the port frequency to help reduce overexcursion of a subwoofer. So we do have the ability to do do these side chain EQs and limiters if you enable them. But again, you're gonna have to do a little bit of work on that. Output EQ. So this is usually where we're going to apply any manufacturer recommended equalization for our generic system here. One of the first things we probably want to do is select a high pass frequency and an appropriate slope. We can do it just by sliding around here, or we can free field enter text. Pick your slope. They're all there. Pick your filter. We've got you covered for just about anything that's out there on the market. And then we can by clicking the plus button, we can add parametric filters, high shelving, low shelving, or all pass filters. And we can just add these. Maybe you're doing it in the commissioning phase, or maybe you're building the speaker out and you're going to save it to a library because you manage 8 different facilities that have this type speaker in it. So we can we can add various filtering. Note that the these filters on the on the output are expressed in Q. So make sure if you need to convert from octave bandwidth, you do so properly. We have dynamic EQ functions. Again, these are advanced functions that, maybe you use it to get rid of sibilance in a primarily, voice system, but just like, similar to the, the EQs I was showing for side chaining the crossover. These can be frequency dependent. Again, these are advanced topics. Be sure you know what you're doing. You could do a lot of damage if you're tinkering around in here and creating big boosts or gains or cuts if you don't quite know what's going on. Input EQ, I have the ability to add on the input side. Perhaps I've got a biamplified speaker that I am I'm optimizing, and I don't want to mess with the crossover or whatever, especially if I've got if it's if a system's crossing over at 2K or something of that sort. I might want to use an input EQ that comes before both of the system's output EQs, so I'm not disturbing the crossover on that channel. Gain, we have delay, delay in milliseconds. We can also add an FIR. If you've got FIRs, whether you're creating them on site or you're getting them from somebody else, we can load. I said I can load my FIR, and again, this happens to be a 2048 tap. If I show it, if I want to see it, I can show it, or I can hide it, or I can toggle the FIR on and off. We can do up to 2048 taps in 2 different places when you're creating your own setting. Also, take a look in your handout. There's a link to formatting Biamp FIRs. You've got a column of CSV values. We need to add a single quote to those. Look at the handout, and it explains how to do that within within Microsoft or whatever spreadsheet program you may be using. And then we need to save the system. We can decide to lock, we can lock any sections we want to. We can also just hide the stuff from view. Set your password down here. The name our brand speaker, XYZ, family's generic, it's a full range, we can, all these, all these fields are free text. And what you like, you can even, define, what sort of speaker it is. Place any notes you want in here, and you can version these also. And then I can simply save it. It's the 1000 pendant, and it's, it's saving it with my other speakers. And now if I go to add a speaker again and user defined, well, there's my there's where I can find it in my user defined settings. It's a very quick overview of how to create a loudspeaker within the Voltera VenueTune software. If you have further questions, feel free to drop me an email, dave.howden@biamp.com. I appreciate you taking the time to attend today, and please be on the lookout for further webinars about VenueTune and the Voltera series of amplifiers. Have a fantastic day, everybody, and thank you for your time.